Hello and welcome to this demonstration in which I'm going to show you how you can design this wooden banister using ArtCAM Insignia 2015 R2. So the tools I'm going to show you in the specific are the weave tool, the two-rail sweep tool, the texture relief tool, and many more. So let's go on ArtCAM and let's create a new model which is going to be 300 millimeters high, 300 millimeters wide. We want the origin to be in the center of the model and the resolution to be low enough as we don't need it high at the moment. So click OK, and this is our model. So what we're going to do now, we're going to design the vectors that we will need for this weave at the bottom of the banister. So first thing, we're gonna draw a circle which is going to be centered in 0, 0 and is going to have an 80 millimeters radius. So click on create and close the form. So once we're done with the circle, we want to create an ellipse centered in 0, 0 again. This time we want it 260 millimeters wide and 90 millimeters high. Click on create and close the form. So now we want another ellipse, this time oriented vertically rather than horizontally. So we could either create another ellipse or we could just create a copy of this, paste it in the same position, and then enter the transform tool by clicking on this icon here or by clicking T on the keyboard. So we want to rotate this copy by 90 degrees. So we click on apply and this is our new ellipse and we can close the form. Once we're happy with the result, we can select the three vectors and go on vectors, export, and choose the folder we want. We can call these weave pattern. We can choose the format you want. I'm gonna leave these to EPS and save the vectors. If you're happy with these and you're done, we can now start to create our rotary model. So file, new, rotary model, and we want it to be 90 millimeters in diameter, 900 millimeters long. We want to wrap the Y values around the x-axis, units millimeters, and we want the resolution to be as high as possible. So click on OK, and we don't need to save our changes as we've already exported the vectors. So this is how our model will look in the 2D view. In the 3D view, this is how it will look when it's wrapped. If we want to flatten it, this is how it will look. So let's go back on the 2D view, and the first thing we want to do, we want to draw two vertical lines that will retrace the vertical sides of the model. So create a polyline. As you can see, the cursor changes. So we can now press the space bar to create another one, and now right click anywhere on the model to exit the tool. So in the 3D view, that's our lines, you can see them. And now we want to play a bit with the two-rail sweep tool. So let's select a view from the top and let's draw a line that roughly goes all the way across the model. Right click, just to make sure, let's enter the transform tool and let's see that it's 906 millimeters long, so it's long enough. And now let's enter the two-rail sweep tool. So let's select the left line as the first drive rail. The second drive rail is going to be our right line, and this is going to be our cross section. Now nothing will change in the model because this is just an horizontal line. So to modify it, we can just start to insert some nodes and play with them. So let's just start to insert some nodes by pressing I on the keyboard. We can insert as many as we want. So let's insert a couple more. And as you can see, there will be black dots. This indicates that these are not smooth nodes. We want them to be smooth, for this part at least. So let's just hover with the mouse and click S on the keyboard. So they will change to a blue color, and we can now start to move them to see the effects of our amendments live on the banister. Let's move these around a bit. These ones as well. But now, as I don't want to bore you to death, what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit the tool, delete this line, and import a vector I've previously created for the purposes of this demonstration. So vectors, import, and this is the vector I'm going to use. So let me move it, and now you can see how it looks. So let's re-enter the two-rail sweep tool now, and select these as the first drive rail, this line as the second drive rail, and this one as our cross section. And now, as you can see, we've got a beautiful shape for our banister. Now it's important that the drive rails go in the same directions, so as indicated by these arrows here. If they don't, let me show you what will happen. So let's reverse the direction of one of these drive rails, and this is a weird effect we don't really want. So let me reverse it again, and let's go back to the shape we want. So we can click on apply and close the form. Now if you're happy with these, let's toggle to the flat view and select the view from the top. We don't need this vector anymore, we can delete it. We don't need this line either, or this line. So what I'm going to do now, I'm gonna import the two ellipses and the circle. So vectors, import weave pattern. This is our pattern. We want to move it to the bottom bit. So let's enter the transform tool again, and let's move it to an origin position of 300 millimeters in X and 0 in Y. There we go. We can close the form, and now we can start to play a bit with the weave tool. So the first thing we need to do, we need to create a cross section. So let's just go and create a circle, which is going to be 2 millimeters in radius, and we want to create it anywhere outside of the working areas. So let's say 400, 200, and create. Now let me zoom in a bit so you can see the circle. There it is. So we don't need the whole circle, so we're going to enter node editing mode by clicking on this icon, or just by pressing N on the keyboard. And what we're going to do, we're going to cut this vector in halves. So let's right click on this node and say cut vector. You can do the same by pressing C on the keyboard, and the same with this node here. So we can now delete the bottom part and exit the tool, and we're left with our cross section. So now we can play with the weave tool. Let's enter the weave, and let's select these vectors to be our drive rails, and these to be our cross section. This is the result we get. Now I don't really like how the crossovers look like, so I'm gonna change these settings to be 0.1 of a millimeters for the length, and we don't want it to be relative to the cross section. And let's set the depth of the underpass to be 300% of the length and 0% for the height. If the corner shape is set to round by default and the combine mode is set to add, we can click on apply and close the form. Now it looks much better. The only thing we might want to do, we might want to blend this relief with the rest. So let's toggle the visibility of the vectors. Let's select them, and let's enter the smooth relief tool. Now let's select this option, so selected vector, and we want two smoothing passes. Now click on apply and you can see the result. It looks much better now. So we can close these and select the view from the top to see the result. If we want to see how it looks on the banister, this is the result. So we can now toggle again the visibility of this rotary model, and we can start to play with the rest of the model. So the first thing we want to do, we want to add some texture to this part. So the first thing we'll do is create a rectangle, which is gonna retrace basically this part of the banister. So this rectangle is going to be 68 millimeters wide and 300 millimeters high, and we want it to be centered in minus 389 millimeters in X and 0 in Y. Now let's show the vectors. There it is. So create, and we can close the form. We can now enter the texture relief tool. So let's choose the selected vector option again. We want ellipses. We want them to be 7 millimeters in size. 1 for the Z height will do. Let's leave the spacing options as they are, and let's change these to 75%. So basically what these options will do, if you select less than 100, the ellipses will be oriented vertically. If you set these to be more than 100, they will be oriented horizontally. If you set it to 100, what you'll get is basically spheres. So let's click on add, and we can close the form. So as you can see, we've got our ellipses. What we want to do again is to blend them, so we can enter the smooth relief tool with the selected vector option still chosen, and we want two passes again. So click on apply and close the form. It looks much better now, and we can delete the vector we don't need anymore. We can also delete these three vectors, and let's see how the banister looks so far. Now it looks really nice. Now the only thing that we need to do now is to play with this part, as it looks a bit empty. So let's select a view from the top again, and the first thing we want to do is to create a polyline that runs vertically all the way across the model. Now select the line and enter the transform tool again, and we want to rotate these by 15 degrees anti-clockwise. Click on apply and close the form. If the line still runs all the way across as we want, we can now select it and mirror it. Let's make sure that this box is checked, so we want to copy the original objects, and select center. There we go. So we've got our two vectors, and we can close the form. Now, as we want to play around with them, we can select them both and choose the explode vectors option. So these will give me 4 individual vectors I can play around with. So let's select them two and mirror them again. Let's make sure that this box is checked and select center. We want to do the same with the top vectors, so center. We can now close the form, and we've got our pattern again. Now let's select these 4 vectors we've just copied, and let's join them with coincident nodes. So as you can see, we have 4 vectors now, and we will have 1 vector after they'll be joined. So join and close the form. For the other 2 vectors, as we cannot join them, we can group them together. So just go vectors, group vectors. As you can see, they changed in color from a pink shade to a more purple shade. Now, as we've still got our cross section, we can re-enter the weave tool and select these vectors to be our drive rails, and these to be our cross section. This is the result we get. So again, I want to play around with the crossovers. Let's set the length of 5 millimeters. Let's leave these box checked this time, and let's set these again to 0.1 and these to 0. So the crossovers look much better to me now. So again, corner shape round, combine mode set to add. We can apply and close the form. Now, as we've done before, we just want to enter the smooth relief tool by selecting these vectors and entering the tool. We want this option again, we want two smoothing passes. We can select apply and close the form. Looks much better. Now let's see the final product. Looks really nice. If you're happy with the result, what I'm going to show you first of all is how you can improve the appearance of this model on ArtCAM. So let's enter lights and material, and we want to change this shading setup to teak. Now this H in brackets means that the veinings of the wood will be oriented horizontally. So let's click on apply, and this is how it will look like. It looks nice. We might want a bit more of ambient light, so we can set this to something close to 15 and click on apply. Close the form. Now it looks really nice. Now, if we're done with the design, I'm going to show you how you can generate toolpaths for this banister. So let's click on toolpaths and choose a machine relief toolpath from the 3D toolpaths menu. So we want to machine the whole relief. We want a finishing tool to be metric tool. We don't want the steel ones, but we want the wood and plastic ones. 3D finishing, and we want a 3mm ball nose tool for our finishing strategy. Select, and now let's see the options. So we want the strategy to be set to raster. We don't want any angle, so 0 will be okay. Tolerance, let's set it to 0.02 of a mil, and allowance to 0. So the allowance is the thickness of the layer of material which will be left on the model after the strategy. And as this is a finishing strategy, we don't want any material left. For the roughing tool, we're going to choose a 10mm end mill. Let's select it, and let's see the options. So raster again will do. Tolerance, let's set it to 0.03 this time, and we want half of a mil of material left after the strategy. Save Z and home Z, let's set them to 90mm. Let's leave the home X and Y to be 0, and let's click on calculate now. So what ArtCAM will do, it will first calculate the roughing strategy and will display it, and then we'll calculate the finishing strategy and will display it together with the other one. So here we are. We can close the form. So by clicking on these light bulbs here, we can see the strategies individually. So this is how our roughing strategy will look like. You can see the blue lines, the dark blue lines are basically rapid moves, and the light blue lines are plunge moves. So they're both non-cutting moves, while the red ones are cutting moves. The finishing strategy will look like this. We've only got one rapid move, the rest is all cutting moves. So if you're happy with these, what I'm going to show you is how you can save these toolpaths. So let's go on toolpaths, save toolpath as. Let's choose the folder we want. So this one will do. Let's create a new one that will be called toolpaths. We can choose the machine file format we want. I'm just going to choose a generic G code in millimeters. Then we want these toolpaths to be saved as separate files, and we want their details to be appended to their file names. So we can click on save, and by browsing to the folder we've chosen, we can see we've got two files, two tab files, one for the roughing strategy, one for the finishing strategy. Let's just edit one of them with Notepad++, which is a free software you can get from the internet, and you can see we've got our G code. So with this I'm done with this demonstration today, in which I've showed you how you can create this wooden banister using ArtCAM Insignia 2015 R2. Thanks for watching.